we're never going to go back to Maximum Risk, though, are we?
No.
So
No, we're not.
Shall we move on?
If we must.
I know you don't particularly want to talk about it, Scott, but yes.
I've done my part, and I'm damned if you're not going to do yours.
Yes. Let's move on to a film which, of all of the Hollywood bullshit, has one of my absolutely least favourite things in that invokes the wonderful idea of genetic memory. So this film can get bent.
I knew this was going to wind you up.
Yes. We're talking about Replicant. In Replicant, we are introduced to our boy JCVD playing a serial killer. Naughty boy. Edward the Torch Garrott has been leaving a trail of incinerated mothers across Seattle, with the lead investigator, Michael Rooker's detective Jake Riley, unable to capture him, although he comes close in the film's kick-off crosstown chase. However, as he's retiring, somewhat early it seems, Rooker's not that old, so he's closing the book on this and going home to be a family man. Garrott, however, isn't done with the detective, making threatening phone calls and generally being a bit of a nuisance, so when a shady and apparently institutionally insane government agency shows up offering him another chance to get his man, he accepts. In stark defiance of all science, logic and reason, they have grown a clone of Garrott as a prototype of a terrorist capturing system, as they are totally a thing. Genetic memories can be used to track them down once they have been reactivated by, well, let's not look for explanations that don't exist even in this film's universe. To be fair to Riley, his first thought, now that we know exactly what he looks like, let's plaster his mugshots all over across the city, is a very reasonable one. However, it's one that cannot be done for the reason that a film has to be perpetrated upon us. So instead, Riley is given custody of the replicant Garrott, who is a quick study of gymnastics, but essentially has the mind of a child otherwise, to try and raise, I guess, with the hopes of prompting clues to the real Garrott's location. Oh, and they're apparently psychically linked too, because, screw it, why not? I'm only disappointed they didn't give them lightsabers.
Yes, well, they did say they resequenced the genome to make him psychic, Scott.
Yes.
It's all explained.
It's easily done.
The lads, the end doesn't happen otherwise.
Lads, at this point we're 20 minutes into the film, into which has been packed an impressively dense amount of nonsense. I had perhaps been hoping this would escalate into another double team of podcasts passing. Sadly, the film settles into a nice relaxing coma for the next hour, with very little of interest happening, apart perhaps from a few scenes where an understandably stressed and confused Riley takes out his frustrations, physically and verbally, on clone Garrott, which comes across a lot like child abuse or kicking a puppy. It picks up a little bit in the final stretch, with a fight in a geriatric ward where they're throwing old geezers and wheelchairs at each other, in a pretty decent action sequence, but that's very much too little too late after a flat middle that's taking a stupid concept altogether too seriously. I can't lay all that much of the blame at Van Damme or Rooker's feet, or even Ringo Lam's, to be honest, who are more or less doing as well they can with the material available to them, but Lawrence Riggins and Les Weldon's script just isn't up to snuff, with a premise that needs to be either much more or much less ridiculous. Well, as you've probably gathered by now, I do not recommend that you seek out Replicant. I also can't bring myself to say that I hate it. It ultimately was just too dull to have too strong an opinion on, which I certainly wasn't expecting after that opening salvo of silliness. Back down the memory hole you go, and I shall never think of you again, unless I revisit the vaguely similarly themed Jet Li vehicle Unleashed or Danny the Dog in some parts of the world, which I recall being a great deal more fun than this. Yes.
And also had Bob Hoskins.
Yes.
Drove me nuts. Yeah. I was also, Scott, very uncomfortable with Michael Rooker's character in the way he was just beating up what is effectively a 2-day-old child with no memory.
Mate, that's three of us.
Yeah, that was not comfortable at all. This film's tremendously stupid, but it's not stupid enough. Yes. And like you, it's not good. And there's basically nothing redeeming about it, but I didn't hate it. I was just bored.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there with my eyes pointing in the direction of the screen like, well, that's dumb.
After 20 minutes, it just goes round in a circle for a whole hour and doesn't do anything. It does the same thing about 4 or 5 times and then ends. It's like, no, thank you.
It's weird too. There's a kind of weirdly dark thing stuck at the end too, which actually, in terms of a proper film about this kind of thing, would actually be quite sinister. Which is when he goes to visit when the bad guy goes to visit his mother in the hospital with his wig like a dyed string mop. And he's saying that, I killed this woman for you, and I cut her nice and slow and stuff like. That's super creepy if you have it in a film with the tone of something like Seven.
Yeah.
Not in a Ringo Lam supposed martial arts film with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
And you're not dressed the way you are.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to chime in, so I have detailed files, right? I'm going to read some of this back out of order because based on the fact what I've just been saying about Jake. So I'll go to the last note that I've made, which is Jake the most irredeemable piece of ever? He gives Replicant literal dog's abuse throughout, completely dehumanises him at every turn, then turns around and proclaims, "I'm your family now," as if this isn't the thin end of a really terrible wedge.
Yes, and why isn't his partner, that woman, creeped out by that? The fact that he's in the house with her son and he's doing that to another human being.
I'm just going to handcuff this guy to a pipe in the cellar. Don't think too much about it. I was actually really pleased with the way this movie ended because I'd have thrown my phone out of the fucking window if Replicant had ended up living with Jake. I'm like, what the happy horse is this? That is hands down the strangest dynamic I've come across in a film ever, and I am really pleased because the film showed no iota of being aware enough of itself that I thought it was actually going to end the way it did. Throughout, I'm like, oh shit, he's going to end up living with this guy who is the most abusive, narrow-minded person I have had the misfortune to cross paths with and be called a good guy in a film in any number of years. That character, Michael Rooker's character, oh my days. How do you read that script and sign on thinking, yes, I would like to try and convey that to an audience? That is mental. Absolutely mental. The first note I've made, slightly less in depth, is why have they built a helicopter pad in a bush? Which
I had that thought as well. Why?
Well,
is it a stealth helicopter pad?
I watched that and I went, And then it wasn't until 2 days later, today, I went back and I had a look when I was preparing these notes, and I had a quick look at IMDb trivia, and I think under goofs someone has listed there's a helicopter lands in a bush for no reason, and I thought, oh good, it's not just me then.
Yeah. It's not a goof though, because you don't do that by accident. There's a helicopter on it.
Exactly. So yeah, for me the biggest question, and if I may try and paraphrase what I think you guys were perhaps trying to encapsulate, is that it's remarkable to me that this film appeared to be trying so hard and had so many ideas, yet I somehow found it less rewarding than Maximum Risk. This is clearly, to my mind, if you look at the timing of this feels like Ringo Lam trying to do his Face Off, but without the budget, the stars, or even a halfway decent script. It's trying to do that thing of playing around with the theme of duality, which Face Off did. But Face Off, to your point, Scott, had the decency to just go all in and be as mental as possible.
Yeah.
And that's why that worked. Whereas this just keeps falling flat on its ass. So the minute, and no joke, Drew, the minute the phrase genetic memory got thrown up, I burst out laughing and I thought of you, right? The idea of that, though, is no more stupid than the premise of swapping faces intrinsically. But the problem is that this movie just takes itself far too earnestly. But again, to the point we were making before, bless Van Damme if he isn't really trying his best to act here, and act with a capital A. The man-child stuff occasionally borders on touching. He's making a real effort, but then it forgets it's trying to be a violent serial killer movie, and it goes for laughs by having him walk out into the street wrapped in toilet tissue. And it's like, wait a minute, is this a thriller or is this Rain Man? What is it you're going for here? And bless him, Van Damme is making such an effort. He doesn't even kick anyone in the face in this movie until like an hour and 20 minutes in. This is genuinely his best attempt at doing something that I've seen so far, something that would constitute, inverted commas, acting. And it is possibly the worst context for him to have deployed this in. It's remarkable. Yeah, everything about this just feels so misguided. And the notion of genetic memory is that thing, and you've spoken about it a lot of times, Scott, this thing that a lot of people will speak about, which is, right, I will give you one leap of faith, right? I will buy into one ridiculous concept for your film, but you'd better back it up. And listen, genetic memory is no more daft than any other number of things. If it's going to make the movie work, that's fine. But this movie doesn't work. It doesn't even follow through. It doesn't have the good faith to follow through on the premise of genetic memory and that. Okay, you can have the fight at the end, like you said, Scott. The whole thing of right. So what training has he got? He's watched a gymnastics video, and then that's deployed, and that pays off in a whole one scene where he's having a fight with those FBI guys or whatever the hell they are, in the. In whatever location it is, I can't remember, and they end up standing staring at him completely dumbfounded while he does basically the parallel bars off a couple of pipes for about 10 minutes just to really hammer home the point, and then it's never mentioned again. And you get to the climax then where all of a sudden there's no notion that anyone in this film has any martial arts training whatsoever, least of all Replicant, and then his evil the original guy's evil Van Damme, whatever the hell his name is, starts basically trying to spin kick him at the end, and he keeps matching his moves and blocking his moves move for move. He's like, I can read your mind. Yes, understanding, I'll buy the premise that you're telepathically linked. That doesn't explain how you're all of a sudden able to execute the martial arts required. Am I thinking about this too hard?
Are you thinking about it?
Yes.
Then you're thinking about it too hard.
Yes.
And more importantly, though, Craig, you're right about the acting, and this film doesn't deserve it. And the key thing about these films we're covering is that the worst thing about any of them isn't Van Damme. Yeah. Van Damme's not the problem in any of them.
I know.
And I kind of appreciate that he's trying.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of him being this kind of simple, childlike character, you could do that so much worse.
Yeah.
It could just look absolutely comical and ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
he's not the worst I've seen that type of thing being done in movies.
I know, not by a long chalk. Yeah. And honestly, the only time I think it's really difficult to buy is just when the wardrobe department have made him look like he's dressed like a wee boy with a baseball cap and stuff. Like there's something about the clothing there just made it seem dafter. But yeah, Van Damme's not the problem. The film is, and the film is stupid.
Yes.
And yeah, I would again see the nonsense sci-fi and stuff in it. And if everything around it was better, you don't care about that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, right, this is your daft idea, psychic, magic, genetic memory clone man. Okay, right, but I struggle to believe that when I don't believe any of the motivations of any of the characters. Like, why is this woman with Michael Rooker? Why would she not just be getting her son away from him immediately? And
the biggest danger in this film is Michael Rooker and not the serial killer.
And why have we gone to all the bother of setting up this whole genetic memory thing and having a replicant and all that thing, and all it really boils down to is him remembering a triangle and a clock, and apparently that's good enough to set in motion all the rest of the events at some point. And
triangle clock drawn like a 3-year-old or something. Yeah, and it's like none of the characters make sense. So like, look at his mother, who's like finds him in the bathroom struggling with half-naked Van Damme, and she sees him handcuff him to the pipe that he apparently has in the bathroom for the purpose of handcuffing people to, because that appeared to serve no structural purpose. But it's like, it's not what you think. It's like, well, either you think he's having a relationship with this guy, in which case it's none of her business, but if she thinks that homosexuality is wrong, well, she can die in all the fires, or she is what she thinks, which is him beating up a man and then imprisoning him against his will, and she's fine with that. So,
she can die in all the fires.
Yes.
It's bizarre. The frustrating thing is this is a movie that has an idea that could have worked
if almost everything about it was different.
Exactly. Somewhere under here there is a passable movie. There is a passable B movie, certainly, but
taint this one.
Yeah, and again, where's the Ringo Lamness of it?
Yeah,
it's bizarre. Before we move on, I'm pointing this out. Now, there's a website called DVD Verdict, which I think I've heard of before. Now, I am not familiar with the reviewer Mike Jackson, and I don't know whether he's simply never seen any other Van Damme films or he's a moron, but he said of Replicant, It's far from a great film, but Replicant is quite possibly the best film Van Damme has starred in since his debut in Bloodsport. Maybe he just doesn't like Van Damme. Maybe that's it. But
It's an interesting take.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bloodsport's a bad film, and Van Damme is particularly bad in it. And actually, it's notable that all films post Bloodsport, Van Damme was a notably better actor.
I'm not even that big of a Van Damme fan, and I can name you 3 films right off the top of my head that disprove your theory, Mike.
There's a few reviews for this, and also in Hell as well, where they're saying it's one for Jean-Claude Van Damme film fans only, whereas that's exactly incorrect, because they're not very Jean-Claude Van Damme at all.
No, he's not roundhouse kicking anybody in the face or punching a single cobra.
Oh dear.